FDA's crackdown on vaping advanced to a new phase last week as the world's largest public health agency launched The Real Cost, a $60 million education campaign designed to dissuade youth from vaping. With the launch came the FDA's first television spot titled Epidemic, which presents an unsettling visual metaphor of an organism invading the lungs, bloodstream, and brain of youth who experiment with e-cigarettes. It's a powerful ad with a troubling message.
There's an epidemic spreading. Scientists say it can change your brain. It can release dangerous chemicals like formaldehyde into your bloodstream. It can expose your lungs to acrolein, which can cause irreversible damage. It's not a parasite, not a virus, not an infection. It's vaping.
Joining us today to talk about FDA's new campaign, its so-called historic enforcement action against vaping device manufacturers and retailers, is Oliver Kershaw, the founder of the world-renowned e-cigarette forum and owner of Vaping.com. Oliver, thanks for joining us today on RegWatch.
Thanks for having me, Grinch.
Oliver, first off, please share with our viewers your reaction when you first saw the Epidemic ad.
Disappointment, I would say. It's hard to gauge the truth of it because it's not really making any particular contentions. And where it's talking about epidemic, for instance, the onlooker, the observer, hasn't been given any kind of data to really judge that on. We just have to take it as read that the United States is undergoing an epidemic at present.
So for our viewers who don't know about e-cigarette forum, which I find that extremely hard to believe, why don't you give them a bit of a background on, you are a pioneer, really, in vaping. Explain that to our viewers.
E-cigarette forum, or ECF as I call it, is a website that I set up in the dark and distant times of 2007, after having gotten hold of an e-cig of the time and thinking that this was an exceptionally potent concept, but needed quite a bit of improvement. And I was so taken with the notion that, and equally taken by the fact that there was no information about this thing, that I set up this community and grew it. Many sort of stalwarts of today's vaping industry started on ECF, and it became the sort of ground zero, the innovation hub of the e-cigarette world. It also started the conversation on advocacy. So CASAR was founded by members of ECF, and so I've had a very privileged view on the whole history of how this has all played out over the last 10-11 years.
What is your thoughts on the FDA crackdown?
To some extent, I think there's a certain inevitability about what's happening right now. As I wrote in my post the other day, the first time I saw Juul, I knew two things about it. Number one, it was going to be a huge product. And number two, it was going to be hugely controversial. And it was almost perfect for the anti-smoking, anti-vaping community. There's a whole kind of series of things that are leveled against vaping. Now, almost every single one of those is being leveled in one neat package at Juul. Juul, we can say, is probably the first breakthrough vaping product in terms of its mass market appeal and how it's, the well-documented commercial storm that it's taken the United States by over the last year. The inevitability of that, let's call it a law of physics, is that if it appeals to adults, it will appeal to youth as well. It's just, I think Lynn Kozlowski, who I'll almost certainly reference a lot, has said, name a product in the history of legal products, or illegal, I suppose, that has appealed specifically to adults and not to youth. And it's a great challenge because there just isn't one.
You referenced your post, Oliver. That's a post that you put out last week, and it kind of caused a bit of a stir because it was pretty strong. And I'd like to go through just a couple of points with you, just one at a time, though.
Cool.
So you wrote in here, Gottlieb, and that's referring to Commissioner Gottlieb of FDA, is revealing to us the ethical position of the FDA. What did you mean by that?
if you're going to make the products not appeal to youth, do you also then therefore necessarily have to make them appeal less to adults? And I think the answer is probably yes. I mean, the general kind of supposition is that that adults and children, you can sort of have your cake and eat it. So you can sort of take away bits of it, and adults will be fine, and kids it will be less appealing for. I mean, it's just completely implausible. And we've now essentially had Scott Gottlieb saying as much. He's saying, yes, okay, it is implausible. Of course, in order to get fewer kids to use the product, we have to make it less appealing for youth and for adults. And we're fine with that.
Let me read again from your post. This is the following line. FDA is totally in thrall to the Temperance League, and it's utterly neglecting its public health duty. But astonishingly, circumstances have been engineered such that this abstinence-only agenda is the one that is politically impeccable.
Well, politically impeccable is Lynn Kozlowski's phrase again. And I will say that I did preface that sentence by, that I may be a little hyperbolic here, but the substance of the point is absolutely right. Fundamentally, we have a real kind of, abstinence-only, anti-nicotine establishment that runs, that is thought leadership within American tobacco control. And, I mean, I hate to say it, but we have this incredible publishing bias, which is funded by FDA, which essentially funnels tremendous amounts of money into these research centers that are all fundamentally designed to find problems with tobacco products. They're not designed to find opportunity from so-called tobacco products. And so we end up with the minimal risk blown out of proportion. But at the center of this, you have these curious organizations like the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, whose role actually in the trajectory of American policy on tobacco has never been properly scrutinized. It is full of serious questions over what they've engineered, and takes absolutely phenomenal amounts of money from people like Mike Bloomberg. My view is that Mike Bloomberg himself cannot understand the first thing about what's going on here. I think he's, and this is why I say enthralled to I use that word thralled, because actually that is what it is here.
So Oliver, you write in the post, we're close to checkmate here. There's only one solution: unity and aggression. What did you mean by that?
Part of the substance of the post was a general sense that our industry has really lost its sense of first principles and is fighting battles that are basically planted there by the opposition. So stuff over flavors, stuff over, open system versus closed systems. None of this matters, right? The only thing that matters here is the unified narrative about what we are trying to achieve here with our technology in all its forms, which is to make smoking obsolete and redundant. That's the one thing. So that's the unity part. The aggression part is really, well, that comes from something I heard David Swainer saying last week. That's really about. Of course, I don't mean blowing stuff up, right? I don't mean that. It's time to get creative. We, got to start thinking about ways of communicating to people what this is about. And in order to do that, we've got to, I think we've got to get quite aggressive. Look, I'm not gonna be on my back foot anymore on this. I'm speaking to you, I think, more candidly than I've ever spoken about any of this before. I'm fed up with it. We've had 11 years of essentially allowing people that hate every aspect of the industry, not one bit, not pods, right? They don't just hate pods. They absolutely hate the fact that smokers are finding a different way of doing this, and that it could actually do the job. And I make no apology. I'm not going to get drawn on like, conspiracy theories or stuff about, where the money is, because it doesn't matter. The fundamental point is our opponents hate our technology. Our technology is all the same, whether it's in a pod or an open system, it's the same. It has nicotine, it has flavor, it can be used by grown-ups or kids, right? It's the same thing. So if you're getting cross about Juul and you think Juul's screwing it up, well, personally, I don't think they've done their public affairs very well at all. I think they should have been far more bullish and aggressive from the beginning. But fine, you can be cross about that. But to say that pods are something different, or
you're scattering. What's happening is that the opponents to vaping are forcing the proponents of vaping to scatter.
Absolutely. Just pull together. Every time somebody says, the pod systems are designed for kids or they're uniquely addicting kids, say, where's the evidence for that? Tell the real story.
Well, and that's one of the things that we've been asking with regard to nicotine harms developing brains. It seems like a last resort. They have no other science left. All they have is an old wives' tale, which is, Johnny, don't smoke or it'll stunt your growth. How is that any different than nicotine harms developing brains?
You're absolutely right. I mean, this is the same thing. It's worth pointing out that you can more or less give any compound to a mouse in high enough doses, and you will see physiological changes from doing that. But on the flip side, it's well known that the younger you are as an initiator of smoking, at least, the harder it is to stop. We can all get behind that because it's well attested. But to start throwing out these putative mechanisms, and if you read the papers, they're extraordinarily impressive. I mean, they look very, very plausible. But you just take a moment to think about what's being said here. That the greatest generation, so-called greatest generation, that sent man to the moon, that had some 80% of adult men were smoking, were all brain damaged. I mean, it's just an absolute nonsense. And we've got to, we've got to. There is a narrative around this, which is the truth. Nicotine is a reasonably benign substance that really exists at the lower end of things that we should be worrying about kids doing. But its relationship with tobacco is obviously something that we should be concerned about, or not tobacco, smoking, right? So, in order to take that challenge seriously, we have to say the first thing you've got to do is tell people, not just kids, everybody, that the difference between smoking and like I said, almost every other form of tobacco usage.